Example 3, we have our first proof that's worked out for us. We don't have to do anything here, I just want you to see it. This is what a proof looks like. First off, notice my given statement goes in step 1, has given. You don't have to start with given, but I would. That's an easy way to start. Now, anytime you have a vocabulary word, you're probably going to use that vocabulary word as part of your reason. So I'm told Q is the midpoint of PR. Well, what does midpoint mean? Well, midpoint means it's in the middle, and I know these two segments are the same, right? So that's where I'm going to use my definition in step 2. What do I know because Q is the midpoint of PR? Well, I know PQ is equal to QR. That's the definition of midpoint. Now notice what I'm trying to prove though. I'm trying to prove PQ is congruent to QR. Well, PQ is congruent to QR. All I got to do is I have to change my equal sign to a congruent sign. And we know we can do that because that's the definition of congruence. Sometimes we'll say definition of congruent segments because we're dealing with segments. And notice this step matches what I'm supposed to prove. That is how you know you're done with your proof. Sometimes if you read other people's proof, we don't do this in our textbook, but they'll say QED at the bottom. QED is Greek for quad, erat, demonstratum. Hey, I've just done what I was asked to do. If you ever watched the Big Brain Theory, I can't remember what that's called with Sheldon. He will go on a rant, and once in a while you'll see an episode, and he'll say QED. So he's proved what he needs to prove. Now we just proved our first theorem. I can use this in future proofs. I don't have to go through the steps every time. I know if something is the midpoint, I know those two segments are congruent. We're going to call that, ones we use a lot have names. Ones we don't use so much, we don't name them. We'd just have to write it out. So what we're saying here is that my midpoint theorem says, hey, if M is the midpoint of my segment, well then I know those two parts are congruent to each other. That's your midpoint theorem. Now let's actually do a 2-column proof, but we're not going to do the whole thing. We're just going to write down what we know here. We're going to fill in steps 2 and 4, and we're going to try to go through that. Now, step 1, notice is done for us. But even if it's done for you, I would read through that so you understand what's going on. B is the midpoint of AC. And C is the midpoint of DE. Notice I put both my givens in the first step. But notice I actually got 3 givens. So notice step 3, they didn't ask you to do that. They filled it in for you. I know AB equals CE. Now let's take a look. My next reason is the definition of midpoint. So if I look at my first statement, I know B is the midpoint of AC. Since B is the midpoint of AC, I know AB equals BC because the definition of my midpoint. And then I also know C is the midpoint of DE, so I'll put 2 tick marks on here. And I'll know, and I can say DC equals CE. And that is my definition of a midpoint. Now my next given, I have AB equals CE. Well, then you might ask yourself, well, geez, what do I know because of that given? What is going on? Well, notice what happens here. I know AB is equal to CE. So in other words, AB should have 2 tick marks because it's equal to CE. Everything should have 2 tick marks on it. So now I can say, start from the beginning. AB is equal to to CE. I know CE is equal to DC. So I could say AB is equal to DC. Well, and AB equals BC, doesn't it? I actually could say a whole bunch of them. So I'm going to say BC. Instead of writing AB, I'm going to write BC. Actually, I don't need step 4, but I'm going to write it in here. So let's do this. And we're going to go AB. If I look at what I'm trying to prove, let me go back up here. I'm going to go BC. And I know BC equals AB, but I know AB equals CE. Like I said, we don't need that 4th step, but I'm going to put it in anyway. That's substitution. Sometimes it's harder to fill in other people's proof because I have to read their mind. I could have gone straight to step 5 and said BC equals DC by substitution. Where would I get substitution from? That goes back from algebra. Whenever you write something instead of something else, that's going to be substitution. That was clear as mud, wasn't it?